Okay, guys, welcome back to the Sexonomic podcast. We are joined here by Celeste and Danielle. You might notice them, their faces are rather familiar. You might recognize them from Channel 4's Virgin Island. Today, ladies, how are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having us here.
Thank you.
No,
We're excited to join you.
I am just so delighted to have you guys here because, like everyone, I've watched the show, and initially, me and my flatmate, we looked at each other and we said, shall we keep on watching this? And we watched the whole thing in one whole night. We binge watched it because we were so fascinated by it.
Wow.
So tell me a little bit about how the show came about, your work, and, how those two things met.
Yeah, so we were initially contacted because we have these experiential videos online that show us doing like having intimacy with our clients while at the same time teaching them how to be better at intimacy. And the production companies, they said, we've never seen anything like that on television before. We need to show that. And at the same time, they had realized there was this crisis around, virginity and intimacy, and, people just weren't connecting in the same way. And that's our work, is all about helping people reconnect and reclaim their intimacy, their sexual desire. And so it was a real synergy when they reached out to us and said, hey, we want to show your work on television. We want to help these young folks find, create a sex life for themselves and a relationship life for themselves.
Awesome. I think it's such an interesting space because at the moment, I think, especially when you look at young people, which were the predominant contestants on the island, people who've not lost their virginity at the normal ages we expect in society, that there is a bit of a sexual repression going on at the moment. And my thoughts are, when we look at this and we really zoom out, we've got people vastly basing their sexual experiences on porn. We've got lots of sexless marriages. But when we really do zoom out, why do you think it is that people are losing their virginity maybe at a later age?
I think there's there's like kind of like a storm of reasons, a bunch of different reasons, right? First, we have like so much more people. I honestly think that the biggest issue is actually like moving to mostly digital platforms and people kind of not developing the social skills to know how to kind of go on and do it in real life as opposed to how to do it on the phone. And it requires different level of conversation to actually be in person and connect with someone as opposed to like swiping right and left and keeping like a short like what's up conversation as people do on dating apps. And how do you carry out something in real life is much more challenging. So that's one reason. And I think also the pandemic really didn't help because it froze. And we're talking about, Gen Zs, they were like frozen for like 3 years and not really connecting and not practicing those skill sets. So that's another big reasons. And porn gives you immediate gratification with not a lot of effort.
Well, also, like the thing about porn, I'm 26 just for reference. So I feel like I have grown up in that, generation. But, like a lot of heterosexual men, in my experience, from what I know myself and speaking to my friends and doing this podcast, I do question, and maybe women too, like it's fair to say everyone, not just men. But are we being awakened enough, free enough, and like dialed in enough to have the sex that we should be having, like the fun, intimate, free sex? Because I just feel with all of this hiding and taboo that it's not possible.
Yeah, I do feel like, can have so much shame surrounding it. And as Danielle was saying, porn is sort of like the path of least resistance. Like, because you're just there by yourself and you're going for your hottest fantasy through your search terms and, you're scrolling through, you don't have to actually deal with somebody else, which means you don't have to deal with shame. You don't have to deal with rejection. You don't have to deal with awkwardness. Those things require like practice and resilience. And if you can just like, just chat with someone and then ghost them if it doesn't go well, or if you can just watch porn and get your sexual energy out and not have to actually deal with another human being in any kind of long-term way, then I think that's what's happening. I think people are not developing those resiliences. They're just going to the easiest answers.
I always think of it as people obviously are exposed to porn from a young age, and maybe in some cases, if you are a virgin, it can be off-putting, or it's just the thing you follow. But people are learning how to drive. Well, they want to drive the Ferrari before they can drive the Honda. Does that make sense?
Oh, if only porn was the Ferrari between us, okay? Like it's not even scratching the surface because there's like, you get the fantasy. I think the trick with porn is that you get the fantasy, but you don't get the process to getting to your fantasy. So you
Yeah.
don't know how to create a situation that will lead you to this like hot, sexy experience. So that's the missing piece that we really kind of created in Somatica in our method that we developed. Like, how do you
Yeah.
build the building blocks to get to what really turns you on?
Looking inwardsly at this thing, and it reminds me of like Tantra. I mean, maybe you've taken elements of Tantra into Somatica, is this correct?
Yeah, I think what we really, if you think about one of the elements that is also in Tantra, it's this sense of deep embodiment, right? To actually feel the sensations in your body of arousal, of love, of your emotional life, and to deepen into those sensations and really listen to them and see what makes them more pleasurable and what makes them less pleasurable. That's one of the real big skills that I think, again, people are all up in their head and they're in their screens and they're not actually even feeling their body. And so you definitely can't get to the heights of pleasure. You don't know what you want erotically. You don't know how to give something to someone else if you're not feeling the sensations in your body. And that's, we call our method somatica because somatica literally means somatic means of the body. And so it's all about like actually re-entering and reclaiming our bodies and our erotic and emotional lives.
My hat goes off to you two, because to take this approach and really try to like open this up to a lot of people is really hard, because I feel that some of our habits are so deeply ingrained.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Both there's the habits that really ingrained. There's also like a lot of shame and taboo around sexuality. So we took like a topic and that, people ask us all the time, like, you're like, how do you say it in English? You're like creating a little bit, you're controversial, right? And it's
Mm.
true, we are controversial, but mostly because of the taboo. Okay, like people just don't know, don't work with that. And sex is such a thing that people just want to do and they want to explore and they want to find out more, and it can have so much potential of healing and fulfillment and connection. It's like really can be this like amazing thing that feeds us in life. So I thought it's very profound to be able to bring it to TV and show people, kind of like spark the conversation. We've been getting DMs on our socials all the time telling like, wow, like I'm watching it with my niece, or I'm like, you see it, like it touches people across the age spectrum. Like different ages come in and watch it and they start to have a conversation. And that was really important for us, that people start talking about sex and not just hiding and trying to do it like figure it out on their own, because they're not really good educational places that you can learn how to have like a realistic sexual
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. I mean, when you started Somatica and, you figured out what it is and how you're going to teach people, and you've also got surrogates for people who don't know, and you'll see on the show, who are essentially people of Somatica who help teach the people who are looking to learn the lessons. Um, Sometimes in an intimate way and sometimes just more kind of like passively. But when you look at the people who've come in and wanted to practice and improve their sex with Somatica, obviously we're now at the point where you've had the show. I don't know if customer is the right word, but has the student changed over time, or always has it been the same type of profile?
Well, firstly, I want to make a distinction. So somatica is different. There was like three different types of practitioners on the island, and that was somatica practitioners, which were Danielle and myself. Then there were sexological body workers like Aisha and Toma, and then there were surrogates like Kat and Andre. So we're all from different kinds of practices. And in Somatica, we're really teaching people, we're clothes on, but also hands on. So we're really teaching people the tools of like the seduction and the build up. And you can see, really clearly in, our sessions with Jason and Zach, some of the ways that you start to see them embody their desire and their erotic energy and their flirtatiousness through the practice, as opposed to just like, you can't learn how to do those things just by talking about them, right? Like you see the shift in their eyes and in their energy and in the way they feel confident in their body because they're learning in a practical way as opposed to a theoretical way. And that's what's
Mm.
so important about the work that we do. And I don't think, I mean, I think the only thing that's changed, we started this practice in a much less technologically saturated environment, and it's just gotten way more technologically saturated. So I think that what that means is that there's even more disembodiment, and that's what we're seeing. That's what we saw on the island, and that's what we're seeing in our clients.
Is it primarily virgins who would come to your individual, both of you, your practice, or is it kind of all different kinds of people?
We have a variety, like a big age range of people, I'm going to say from 18 to 85, as long as people really, because people have issues with sexuality throughout their lifespan and they need help, if it's sexless marriage or if it is like people want to like learn how to date later on in life when they started in one relationship, now they're moving to another relationship. So there's a lot of issues, or having like more fulfilling sex in their lives. So there's a lot of issues that we've been working with, again, people across the lifespan.
Yeah, definitely not just virgins, everyone. Yeah.
Everyone's involved.
Everyone's involved.
Marriages, I think the statistic in the UK anyway is at least 50% of them are sexless. And I'm sure there are some like just reasons for that. I'd imagine the spike is when you get to having children, that sexual thing just like nosedives, because I know there's factors like menopause and, people think there's the menopause and biological things that happen. But from what we know, people still have sex drive. So why do you think that is such a nosedive and people just stop having sex at some point?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all because I think we have this idea in our culture that sex is just supposed to happen. Like everything else you can work on and improve on, but sex, for some reason, if you love someone, is just automatically supposed to happen. But
Mm.
that's the people who I see who continue to have sex late into their marriages are people who are deeply dedicated to their erotic and intimate lives. They put it as a priority, they work on it, they talk about it, they think we're on a team about this and we're going to keep making our sex life interesting and exciting and deepening and getting to know each other more. Not just like, oh, I hope it happens, but put it on the back burner and do everything else first. And that's why there are so many sexless marriages. People don't know what turns them on, they don't know how to talk about it, and they don't think of it as something that they need to keep cultivating.
And it's also like late, but I can't help but feel this, and I'll say the word. It's kind of laziness because people don't necessarily think that there is that added work to do to it, correct?
Yeah, just it's very British to say laziness. I don't know why I thought about it, because I do think that there is something about realizing, as Celeste said, that it's not going to come spontaneously. So I don't know if it's laziness or like really not knowing what to do about it. So if people get sex, okay, so I would not want to do stuff that's boring. How about we say boredom? Okay, because people just don't know what will make their sex life more interesting, right? So they really don't know how to bring themselves to the next level around it. So they get bored. They don't have the tools to keep bringing it to the next level. So then they prefer to sit on the couch and watch TV, which is fantastic because that's how they watch Virgin Island. But also, right? But also we want to help them have tools and start thinking about like, wow, like there are tools, there are ways to get the sex that you want with your partner or with a partner. So let's see how you can build those tools so you're also going to have fun time in the bedroom. And then you're also going to have time to watch TV, both. Just
that's a really good, like, you know, reflection on it. But even when you look at the people who are actively having sex, you know, let's just take, you know, my generation, Zillennials. They'll do this thing where, you know, a lot of people will be involved in casual sex, and it has pros, it has cons, you know, I'm quite measured on that. But they'll do this thing where they'll get together, they'll slap against each other's bodies naked, but nothing intimate is actually exchanged. Do those people even know the sex they could be having? Like, it's quite sad to think that people think sex is this thing that you just do and you don't necessarily get a lot from it. And also, like, a lot of women have sex and they don't reach orgasm and they think that's just sex. My job is to be there, look hot, and then the guy comes and sex is over.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things in what you just said. You know, one thing I have been noticing in the younger generation is that maybe their lives are rotating a little bit more around their friend groups and their work, maybe their family, and less so just so much around romantic relationships. So there's a de-emphasis there, which means if they're, you know, maybe they still want sex, but they might not want to go into like a marriage or a committed relationship. And I think that's why a lot more casual sex is happening. I do wish that the sex was better, you know, because I do think it's like a lot of times not good for women. There's not a lot of intimacy. I think people are afraid to be very intimate with each other because they think, oh, that means I'm going to have to get into a committed relationship with someone. And they don't know how to communicate like, hey, I just want to have sex with you, but I also want it to be really intimate and connected and pleasurable for both of us. You know, I do date people who are younger than me. And so I find that I have to communicate about those things a lot to help them understand that just because I want to like stare into their eyes doesn't mean I want to marry them. So I think there's like a lack of like understanding and communication. I think the mores are shifting so quickly, but people aren't having the tools to maximize the intimacy and the pleasure that's available in these new structures.
Yes, again, what you said, that was a lot of information, but yes, all like, I'm like, yes, it's clicking. However, it's this combination, I mean, right, Danielle, of people doing this thing, which actually, if you were on the outside, you'd perceive it as the scariest thing, getting naked, having this sexual experience. The part they're most scared of is actually the mental stimulation between two people, the mental relationship. It's not the physical thing people are scared of. It's almost the mental thing that people are avoidant of.
Yeah, and I just like to build on what Celeste said already, which is just like, okay, so imagine you're going and you want to do casual sex, which we are totally fine with. There's no problem with casual sex.
We've
And
all
you
been
still
there.
want it to be, right? But because I think the word casual, people don't understand that casual might still be deep, okay? So you can create a depth of an erotic experience with someone that you don't consider to be your romantic partner or a lifelong partner, and you can still just meet with them and have really deep sexual experiences. But the same as the work that we're doing with sexless marriages need to come in here as well. They need to learn how to talk about their fantasies, how to create this dynamic that will allow them to play out their fantasies. And for that, they will need to create some safety too, to be able to talk about it, and some sort of agreements about, you know, like it's very vulnerable to share your fantasies. And I think a lot of what I see in Gen Zs is really this fear of being very vulnerable with your desires and fantasies because you might be dropped or you might be shamed, or, you know, like it's very intense, especially with social media, you know, like, or needing to report to all your friends about how was those encounters. There's this kind of like experience. So not only they don't have the tools yet, and that's what we're hoping to keep creating and building with Virgin Island, is like more tools around intimacy. You know, season 2 is coming, and more ideas of how to talk about sex in so many ways, and to create those erotic experiences, but then like realizing how to take care of each other's vulnerability and exposure in those moments. I think when people mean casual sex, they mean I don't want to be exposed for who I am with the other person. And that's what we want to start shifting.
And I think that comes with less judgment. Is that safe to say that the answer is removing shame?
Yeah, removing shame and judgment and a lot of like expectations and ideas. I think we have a lot of ideas about the way that relationships and sex are supposed to be, but the honest truth is that's changing all the time. And we can fight against those changes, or we can say, no, how do we really help people get the most out of their experiences in the face of these kinds of changes? And that's always what I'm about. So how do we help people say, okay, so I want something different, and I want to get the most out of it.
I'm so pleased to hear that season 2 is happening, because I know whilst people are shocked, people can't stop watching it, which is a sign people want to know this information, right? But can we like do spin-offs of Bad Hetero Man Sex Island? Can we do that, please?
No taken, no taken.
I hope there's so many spin-offs.
All these guys who think that they're like so good and they know everything, but they can't even find a clitoris, or they think, you know, the actual vulva is called a vagina. Can we all just dump them on an island and yeah.
I thought it was so insightful, when they were talking amongst themselves and they're saying like, I think all of my friends probably don't even know any of this information and don't know what they're doing. And now we're going to go out and we're going to be these sex demons or something. I think one of them called it because they're going to be educated about their partner's bodies. And I hope that that inspired people to start, at least Googling, where is that clitoris?
One thing with the show is there are a few questions like people have been like technically asking me, because I said I'm going to have you guys on here. And the question that came up the most was, obviously these are virgins coming onto the island to learn more and progress. But how do we verify that they are virgins?
I mean, they're self-identifying as virgins, but I mean, I think if you look at their experience and their discomfort, like I don't think it's very questionable what they are virgins.
I think what's important is also like the feeling of lack of experience that people are having. I think like we don't have to stick to this like virgin idea, as opposed to like, wow, like I have no idea. I don't feel confident. I don't know how to have sex, you know?
Yeah.
But they did all self-identify. Like there's nothing you can do beyond that to like prove their virginity.
I highly doubt that the first thing in life they want to do is to go onto television and say, look, hey, I'm a virgin. It's a very brave thing to do, first of all. So I do understand that, like, even if someone is just kind of like after the fame, they're not just going to proclaim that and do that. But I imagine you also do like loads of background work and safety checks and psych evaluations before the contestants come on the show.
Yeah, 100%. They did so much work. The casting team did so much work, and we also had a part of it of really like seeing who's a good fit, and there's like psychological evaluations and the interviews, multiple interviews. It's like there's a lot going on into like deciding about the cast. So it's not just like
Yes,
everyone comes in.
very thorough, very thorough, yeah.
I think the interestingest part that I watched and I clicked with the most was, I think it was Zach. It was the part with Kat, who is one of the surrogates, and he'd been progressing quite well and it felt very organic. And then there was almost this little bump in the road. And I watched it. My flatmate, I don't think he got it immediately, but then he got it. But I immediately like got it as a woman. Because this energy kind of, they were basically, would you call it escalating? Is that what they were doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Going to the next level, as the kids say. And then he said a remark, and I can't quite quote the remark. It was something to do that felt a bit more like slightly invasive, like just a little bit off key, more about just wanting to touch the person and it being this almost like visceral thing. And I immediately
Well, he said, am I intimidating? He said, am I intimidating to you? And maybe you're not used to dealing with someone as confident and as me. So he was trying to understand what was going on, but he really missed the mark, I think.
Yes. And it just like it made me understand immediately like that feeling of being a woman sometimes, and men might not know what they're saying, but they're saying something that's actually quite jarring sometimes of, oh, you just want to get inside of me and spunk and do what you want to do. But it's really nice to see that they corrected that and they actually resolved it in the end and the lessons were learned.
Yeah, I think it was also important, if there's a way that I want to empower people generally, it would be to start talking. That means like if someone says something, don't immediately go to a full conclusion around them. How about we actually stay with them and see like help them see how they impact us, like help them develop the empathy to understand how what they say impacted us. That's my real hope for people to not just like, like come up with those canceling conclusions, but instead understand that people are just on it most of the time. Most people are trying their best and just don't have necessarily the skill set to be able to convey what they want to convey.
Interesting. So, with your work, your practice that you do, both of you, I've always wondered in terms of like, maybe this is more to do with the surrogates actually. In terms of like attraction towards the client, the way I perceived it was everyone has a little bit more of a pansexual attraction, if that's the right word. But I guess, can you have your own preferences in this practice of saying, I am like hetero and, I'm willing to have these boundaries within this sexuality, or maybe I'm bisexual, I'm fine with this, and that. Is it possible to have surrogates in different things, or are they just generally by nature quite broad within their sexuality?
For the surrogates, they definitely asked them what they're comfortable with in terms of which clients they would be comfortable with progressing with sexually. So that is a surrogate's sort of prerogative and decision. I think it's a little bit more flexible for us as somatica practitioners because we're not getting naked and we're not having full sex with our clients. And so I think there's more comfort in general of like trying out things with people regardless of gender, just because we're not kissing, we're not kind of going all the way. And so it's a little bit easier to just feel erotic energy with a lot of different people because there's the container of like the boundaries. Whereas if you are going to have full intercourse with someone or oral sex, I think those preferences actually come in much more strongly. And so with surrogates, there needs to be like, they need to be like honor what's comfortable for them in terms of their who they want to connect with sexually on that level.
People will look at you and think these women, they must be so enlightened, and you are. But is there anything that people would be surprised that you're kind of just a little bit like, actually, I don't like that, or I'm not really into that, because we all have
For,
boundaries.
of course, yeah, we have a preferences. We definitely have a preferences in how we like to have sex, and we have our boundaries around what turns us on and what doesn't turn us on. But I think what Celeste said around the somatica practice, it is really much easier to like play out with people, even if it's not necessarily a full movie. What really, really the essence of what turns us on, and really be able to play it with people because it does not involve a full-on sexual experience. And we are very versed in terms of like the different kinds of experience that we are comfortable playing with.
Yeah, so I love to play them out, but also just like in my own sex life, I think people project all sorts of kinkiness onto people who do this kind of work, and I'm actually pretty vanilla, like I think in some environments you might be kink shamed, but maybe in my sex positive environment you might be vanilla shamed, you know? But yeah, I love to help people play out their kinks in the somatica practice, but in my own bed, I actually am pretty vanilla.
So interesting, because I used to be a dancer, actually, just for some background context, like an exotic dancer. And my job is actually quite boring. I go in, I do the dance, I leave, whatever. But it's always the very straight-laced looking men. You take them in for a dance and they know that nothing more than a dance is happening in here. But they're like, have you got a strap on? Can you fuck me with a strap on? And I'm just like, the amount of repression we have is alarming, And these men are going to go on and live their life and, stay in their marriages and probably not have an awful lot of sex. And I'd imagine it's the same on the women's side. And they're going to live this life that they never really get to experience.
I know that's the sad part, and I think that's one of the reasons when people many times go to porn, because that's their way of in privacy, like exploring things that they don't feel that they can bring to their relationships. I do want to say that when we work with people, we really help them see how they can get as much as possible from what turns them on, because we're really greedy for people's pleasure. We think when people get what turns them on, they're much more motivated and they're much much more connected and they're much more alive and happy in their life. So we are trying to help them see what would be the ways of playing out what really turns them on.
Do you think if everyone is having better, joyful, more pleasurable sex, less shame, how do you think the world actually looks like zoomed out? Do we see less issues in politics?
Oh
Less.
my goodness. No, I mean, I just think about my own mood if I'm getting great sex or if I'm not. It's just such a huge contrast, you know? I think it's so like soothing to the nervous system. Deepens our attachments to people. It deepens relaxation and probably empathy in the body to be able to connect with people on that level. So yeah, I think world peace through better sex, personally. That's my motto.
Well, the reason why I said that was because there is a rumor on the internet at the moment that Elon Musk he had a penile implant, and there's no shame. Go and do what you want to do. But apparently, again, this is a rumor. It did not go to plan. So maybe his dick doesn't work. Maybe it looks a bit dodgy. I'm not sure. But the reason why he's gone a bit like cuckoo is because of this penile implant. I think there's other factors. Like we have to be real with it. But it made me think about how people can act if they're very unhappy and unfulfilled in their sexual life, because it's a very normal hereditary thing to have a libido, to have sex. And obviously we're communicating in a very consensual way, but it just made me think of how much of that, when you repress it and when you really kind of don't practice this hereditary part, how much it affects you.
Yeah. I think it's really is like one of our impulses is to want to have sex. And if it's being repressed, it's really kind of all those hormones get like out of balance. But I also feel that another thing that happens, and that's another one of our other desires through the show is to also expand empathy. So there's something when you actually starting to tune in, it's not just about having sex, and which I am a big proponent of because it does create a good feel in our body and a lot of wholesomeness and wellness in our well-being, but adding to this empathy and like really able to be in consent with someone and seeing where they are and creating this like dance between people as they are trying to negotiate their desires and their turn-ons and their hottest sexual movies, and is where we like really can change our globe and the condition that people are in. More empathy will bring to much more caring and yeah, more love.
You two obviously founded this practice, individually started on your own unique paths, right? How did you even get into the world of, following this path that isn't really necessarily too carved out, but education, sex therapy? How did you go from, ooh, I enjoy this thing, but I want to help other people enjoy this thing too?
I mean, that's exactly it. That was the motivation. Like, I love sex. I feel comfortable with it. I want to, people always talk to me about it, and I feel like I can help because there's so much shame and repression. And then, I think we each went on our own educational journeys. I got my bachelor's in women's studies and my master's in human sexuality studies. And then we met in this experiential training, and we really started our practices simultaneously. So we got to build this method together from the ground up, which was an amazing experience. But yeah, I just love helping people have more pleasure and more intimacy and more joy, less shame and less trauma, basically.
Yeah, and I definitely grew up in a much more repressed environment. And then like when even though they did not touch, they did not get, because no one was talking about sex, I kind of said like, oh, that's a place no one's talking about. Let me get in that crack, It's kind of like an opportunity in my brain to talk about stuff that people are not talking about in my family of origin and, environment. But for me, it was really also my personal journey of finding like exploring my sexuality and like, really feeling the power that's around sexuality, that led me to, I got all my master's in clinical social work and my bachelor's in psychology, but then I said like, no, this is the way to really help people feel into their joy and aliveness and feel how much goodness there is for them in the world. And that's where I got my PhD in human sexuality, and really kind of Celeste and I met in a shared program and started to build the somatica together, the somatica method. an institute. Yeah.
You must have also had like a nice click together. There must have been that moment where, you were both studying and you were like, aha, we kind of like vibe well together. And like, look at you now.
Yeah, I think it was our first workshop that we taught together. It just flowed so amazingly. And I don't know. I mean, I just respect Danielle's brilliance so much, and I think there's this mutual respect, and so it did flow really well.
Yeah, we like as different as people can be, but we share like one, and I think it's great because we bring variety of different experiences and different ways of being into the practice, and which helps us de-shamify people. If I don't do something and Celeste does it, I said like give Celeste as an example, and vice versa. Like she's the good girl, I'm the naughty girl. Like we have a ways to play with it, even though we look like we're the opposite. But shh, don't tell anyone. So, but the way that we almost like it with this method, the way that we think alike is unbelievable. Like two different human beings that think so alike. We almost like complete each other's sentences when we like thinking about the method and like building blocks around sexuality and relationship and supporting people. It's kind of pretty amazing.
It's meant to be. Also, it's kind of like a network, like a web in your life. You will interact with different people. And that could be like a religious way of looking at it or just pure randomness. We'll encounter different people in our life. And one thing that I'm learning at the moment is that, sometimes you might be very attracted to someone from a romantic, sexual point of view. But actually, when you get to know them, necessarily, you might find that you don't click with them. And then you go into someone else and you really click with them. I personally believe that you're not meant to click as well with everyone. Some people, your personalities are like really meant to mesh, and some of them aren't. But I can't help but feel that these days, because a lot of people have this very, external way of looking at things, looking at the shell, that people don't really bother to look at that really internal thing of, oh, we actually click really well.
Yeah, I really feel that people are looking at the external, which is just one dimension, and there's like really the compatibility is much more around like what turns us on, what is it? There's like life compatibility, which also is super important. Sexual compatibility, just like one realm of connection, and erotic compatibility. There's life compatibility. Some people don't have the same philosophy about how to balance your checkbook and how do you spend money and do you travel, not travel, how do you raise children, do you want to have children, all those things, right? We call it relationship design, and we definitely train our coaches to work with that. Really, the compatibility around sexuality is so unique and it's so not trivial. So just looking at the external of how people look is just barely scratching the surface and might not lead you to the right person. So when I help people, I help them see like what is it that how to start to have the conversation about what turns each other on, as opposed to like, oh, well, everyone likes to hear that they look hot, but it's not the only thing that people are gonna make them successful in connection with each other.
Do you find with your sexuality, particularly both of you, feel free to chime in, that it is much more of a mental draw, physical one, or maybe you are more inclined to go, they're hot, I want to, get with them?
Yeah. I think I'm probably a little bit more, it wasn't always this way, but I think at this point in my life, I'm probably a little bit more lookist. Like I really want my partner to be very physically attractive, and I'm really turned on by their attractiveness. I also want the mental and, sensual, and intimate connections, but I do like, I do like to feel very attracted to someone physically. Yeah.
And is that
Yeah,
like,
and for me, it's much more, sorry.
oh, no,
For me, it's
continue, sorry.
much more them being able to really stimulate me psychologically is really important. Like match me and find pleasure in that story. And the energetic connection is really important, because if they're like just doing the move and don't have the energetic flow, they're like an immediate no. Like if they know how to bring the full energetic experience, which sounds maybe like complete cuckoo, like, but there's a way, other flowing with the erotic energy and how they know how to stay present with it is super important to me. Yeah.
I'll kind of use myself as the little therapy guinea pig here for a moment. So for me, I found that if I find someone initially quite attractive and they're hot to me, over time I kind of just don't find them that attractive. But I found that people I'm most attracted to over time are people I know and I build a relationship with, and you get to see all the different spectrums of who they are. And I just never am attracted by, like, great, I see a six pack, I see someone who's like very like typically like stereotypically like beautiful, stunning man, but it just never really gets me going. And that's common, I feel, with women because we have this thing called dad bod, and women seem to be more attracted to it. So I wonder if that's just a me thing or if that's a lot of people.
No, I'm just like a man.
She is.
But there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that.
I feel great about it.
Yeah.
But I think that also there's nothing wrong with not necessarily. I think there's nothing wrong with being attracted to. It's just like we're different. The same way they're different in other ways, what turns us on. It's totally fine to be different in like whether you're attracted to people that have six pack or not, you know? Like for me, it's not the biggest motivator. Clearly not for you either, Heidi. You like that's not the motivator for you. And really clicking and knowing the people is much more attractive.
Oh my God,
Muscles
it's
make a
the
difference.
booty, the booty.
I feel like the six pack guys, though, they kind of present themselves, and I am stereotyping, yeah. The six pack guys present themselves, and they say, "Look, I'm hot. Do you want to jump on this?" And that just like it just doesn't turn me on at all. You know, just so much these days, people, especially my generation, they go, "Look, you look hot. I look hot. Let's do this thing." And to me, it's just like, no, actually, I don't want to do it. But yeah.
I have a secret formula. It's more that I go for guys who are a little bit more nerdy, but they also have super hot bodies, and so they aren't all like full of themselves.
That's a good
And
thing
so
to
then you
do.
get like that intimate, you get the intelligence and the booty.
Yeah.
She needs
Like a
the
nice
booty, Heidi. What can we do?
It's interesting to see the differences between you both. So season 2 but it's interesting for the audience to know more about you and like kind of your journeys like into doing this, because I understand like there's parts of your world that you'll probably want to keep private, and I will try to respect that. But it's interesting to also, it's like your teacher at school. So you see them out in public and you're like, I didn't know you were into this. And, you know, you go to the supermarket and stuff. So it's interesting for people to know kind of your world and like what you're into. Like, are either one of you in a relationship, or what's that kind of thing like for you?
I identify as solo open, so I am not looking for a relationship. I'm my own primary partner, but I love deep, intimate connection with people.
And I present myself all the time differently because I think there's something that's really hot about it, the mystery around, like people don't know exactly everything about me. So let's see how I out myself now. How about that? Okay, I'll give you the full Monty, Monty about it. Okay, I'm married for 31 years. There was a whole like clip around that, but I'm also open for 20 of them. So.
Okay. So you're a little bit of a tease, Danielle. You like to not give the full thing to keep them like a
I
little bit
do.
hooked.
Yeah, that's what turns me on.
I
She's
feel
very mysterious. She's very mysterious, but I also want to say, like, a lot of people say, oh, open relationships don't work. Well, Danielle and her husband have the most phenomenal open relationship, and I think it's part of what makes their marriage so strong. So it's really beautiful to see, and it's definitely a counter argument against that silliness. Because all different kinds of relationships work, and it's different for different people what they need.
you must have been doing it a long time before it's even gained like a little bit more acceptance, Danielle.
Yeah. I believe like yeah, the open part is 21 years for sure. We started when 10 years into our marriage, have children, your age, young adults, Gen Zs themselves.
I feel like people, when they do open the relationship, there's this almost like picture, right? This stereotype of the relationship is on its last legs. We like each other. We want to stay together. So we're going to open this and just hope it saves it. But I can imagine it's just a stereotype. But if someone is thinking, I might want to explore this open relationship idea, and I'm with a partner or I'm not with a partner, how do they make sure that they're doing everything they can to like open that the right way and the healthiest way?
I think the motivation of why you want to open your relationship is really important. I know for us, it was really part of our core belief system. Like we really, both of us believe in freedom and we don't want to limit each other around our freedom. We really, really big on that. So that's like a core motivation in our relationship. But like everything else, I think you want to know why you're doing it. You want to know that you and your partner are in agreement partner, or if you're solo open, you want to know that it's a different story. Celeste will tell you about that. but if you're in a partnership, you want to find out what's the motivation and then like what is it that you want to get out of it. And then there's time to explore and you want to start small. You don't want to just like dive in head first and into an empty pool. I say you want to make sure when you jump head first, you kind of cushion yourself. You start with small experiences. You might start with saying like, hey, maybe we'll just start fantasizing together. What would it look like? And then as you're like building a fantasy, you seeing people's reaction in it. It's like, oh my God, am I triggered when I'm imagining you with another partner? Am I excited when I'm imagining you with another partner? Am I triggered when I'm thinking that you're going to have develop a relationship with that partner? Or am I only okay with sex? So it's like really an exploration process. And it's good to like really start with fantasizing and then maybe just going to a play party and have like rules around that, like really starting to kind of uh, check it out and slowly.
Yeah, and Danielle and her husband did not open their relationship from like a last resort kind of place. They are deeply bonded and securely attached, and they started it from that desire for each one of them to be fully themselves, and I think that, but also sometimes when people open their relationship from a last resort place, it can work. So it's not like, it's not like it has to be one particular way, but they started it that way, which is amazing.
It sounds like you two found, well, you were together and then you said, we're both whole, so we feel secure in allowing this and opening it up. And then you've kind of got yourself, Danielle, who, yourself, Celeste, who you like your hot nerds and you like to. Where are you finding these hot nerds?
I mean, you can find them in San Francisco, you can find them in London.
If we dial it back, obviously we've said a lot of issues of what people are facing and you've given your thoughts and your expertise around them. If you could both just give maybe one separate issue of something that we're not speaking about and we're not practicing enough in our sexual muscles, what is that one thing individually from you both?
But yeah, I'm all about like making consent sexy. I think that's a thing that, we're in the post Me Too era, and consent is really, really important. It's tremendously important that it became part of the conversation. And now, how do we do it in a way that like is part of the seduction? And I really want to bring that to season 2 of Virgin Island as well.
Oh, you're getting spoilers, Heidi.
Yourself, Danielle?
I really want to emphasize, we talked about it here a little bit, but I really want to emphasize about people are different. So don't try to fit a square peg in a round hole or vice versa.
Wow. I think my lesson is shake it up, guys. Like, stop doing the same, like, boring thing you do each time. Like, change one component. You touched on season 2. Obviously, is that greenlit or?
Oh yeah, announced. It's been announced.
Mentioned.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, where is the island? Because I highly doubt Virgin Island is in the Virgin Islands.
No, it's in Croatia.
Are you staying in Croatia or are you moving it?
The show's gonna stay there, yeah.
Okay, amazing. Like, it's been so great to speak to you guys, and thank you for that little teaser of we're getting season 2. I'm delighted, and I'm sure everyone's going to be watching it, because I feel that even though you've watched it once, it doesn't mean that you've seen every single part of this ever continuing story that people have with their sexuality. And I also say well done for all of your work and your achievements, on the show. I think you're doing something that is really like breaking through the mold, and you're getting people to speak about sex, which is notoriously hard, and have conversations and look within their lives to have more joy. So I say well done and thank you to that. If people want to find you, where can they go and find you?
They can find us on Instagram and TikTok, Celeste and Danielle official on Instagram and Celeste and Danielle on TikTok. And of course, you can find us on learn.somatica.com if you want to like take your learning and not wait for season 2. In between, while you can start taking, classes that are still experiential, because we really do the same style that we're teaching in the Somatica style. We teach a lot of components around sexuality and how to have those conversations, how to figure out what turns you on, like things like that in our classes, learn.somatica.com. And if someone is called to be a Somatica coach, we have a training where we teach people who want to be coaches in the method, and you find us at somaticainstitute.com.
Well, thank you, ladies, for taking the time to come on. We'll put your links in the bio so people can find where you are. And yeah, can't wait for season 2.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you, Heidi.